a long time, theories have suggested that extraterrestrial beings with highly advanced technology once set foot on Earth in ancient times and played a role in accelerating the development of early civilizations. This idea has been the central theme of numerous television programs, documentaries, and even remains a hot topic across modern social media platforms. However, some recently published evidence has entirely rejected this hypothesis, arguing that aliens never visited our planet and that all those ancient achievements were the work of human beings alone, with no interference from any cosmic entities. So where does the truth lie? If not visitors from the stars, then who were the real masterminds behind those timeless monuments? What are their deeper origins? You are invited to embark on a journey of discovery where the light of reason cuts through the fog of history and mystery in search of answers to riddles that have endured for millennia. Let us begin with what seems like a random number, 299,792,458, the speed of light in meters per second. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, this is the maximum speed at which any matter or information can travel in the universe. Strangely, the geographic coordinates of the Great Pyramid of Giza, when converted into decimal format, align almost perfectly with that number. Is it just a coincidence or a coded message from the distant past? And it doesn't end there. When the three Great Pyramids of Giza, Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure are placed on a star map, they appear to be precisely aligned with Orion's belt. How could the ancient Egyptians, with their primitive tools, have achieved this level of precision down to the smallest angular deviation? This raises profound questions about their astronomical knowledge and engineering capabilities. Or perhaps they had access to something far beyond their time. This is why, for decades, many foreign scholars have sought to claim the pyramids as part of the shared legacy of human civilization, rather than viewing them as a symbol of Egyptian pride alone. From here, a quiet yet ongoing debate began, one that persists well into the 21st century. Who truly built this magnificent wonder? Ancestors of modern North Africans, a white race from the West, or mysterious beings from beyond the stars? Today, Egypt stands at the crossroads of Arab North African, Mediterranean, and ancient Saharan tribal cultures. Its people carry the blood of many civilizations, defined by a spirit of compassion, unity, and pride in their ancestral heritage. Meanwhile, discussions about the origins of ancient Egyptians often begin with the influence of European powers over North Africa during the past 300 years, a period during which Western scholars tried to redefine Egypt as belonging to Europe rather than Africa, contrary to what history and geography clearly record. Since the 1920s, many American intellectuals began questioning the whitening of Egyptian history, a subtle but persistent process in Western academia. In 1955, Dr. Charles Diop, a physicist and anthropologist from Senegal, became a pioneer in defending the African-centered perspective. He argued that ancient Egypt was an inseparable part of Black Africa, and that all attempts to disconnect the two were unscientific and politically motivated. Diop and his supporters drew from various ancient sources, especially the works of Greek historian Herodotus, who lived in the 5th century BCE. Herodotus described the ancient Egyptians as having dark skin and curly hair traits that closely resemble those of modern-day Ethiopians. The views of Dr. Charles Diop, once considered a lone dissenting voice, have gradually been reinforced by numerous independent archaeological and anthropological studies, especially in the East African region over the past half-century. A key piece of evidence emerged in 1987 when Professor Martin Bernal of Cornell University used data from linguistics, archaeology, and mythology to argue that while we may not be able to pinpoint the exact racial composition of the ancient Egyptians, their cultural foundations firmly place Egyptian civilization within the broader African world. According to Bernal, Egyptian culture bears clear similarities to those of modern sub-Saharan African societies, more so than to European or Southern Mediterranean cultures. While some of his conclusions were criticized as biased, increasing evidence in the 21st century has strengthened the hypothesis that ancient Egypt may have been a Black civilization, something still reflected today among the Nubian communities living along the Nile in southern Egypt and Sudan. Although modern Egypt has undergone extensive Arabization, Many native black communities in Egypt and Sudan still speak a language closely related to ancient Egyptian. This language belongs to the Nilo-Saharan family, a linguistic branch recorded and confirmed by ancient Greek and Roman scholars thousands of years ago. History also tells us that Nubia was once the cradle of powerful empires, most notably the Kingdom of Kush, which conquered Egypt in the 8th century BCE. But is that enough to assert that pre-25th century BCE Egypt was entirely a black civilization? This remains a deeply complex question. Ancient Egypt went through more than 30 dynasties, and the most famous pyramids are believed to have been constructed before the 4th century BCE. Therefore, proponents of the Eurocentric view argue that Egypt was not a black civilization. According to them, the greatest achievements, such as the Pyramids of Giza, the Sphinx, and advanced astronomy, predate Nubian involvement in Egypt's political scene. This casts doubt on the true extent of early African influence. These criticisms are not just aimed at the arguments of Diop or Bernal, they also challenge the writings of the ancient Greek historian Herodotus. Some scholars argue that Herodotus lacked the expertise to speak accurately about Egypt, that his accounts were subjective, sometimes shallow, and potentially flawed. They accuse African-centered scholars of mistranslating Herodotus's original Greek. Specifically, they claim that the word he used for black people does not strictly mean that, and that if he had wanted to describe skin color, he would have used the term sunburned, a metaphor for the dark complexion of Nubians or other peoples from the sub-Saharan region. But if that argument doesn't convince you, consider the worldview of the ancient Egyptians themselves. How did they perceive their own ancestors? How did they portray themselves in art and sculpture? And more importantly, how did they portray foreigners? Like many historical cultures, the ancient Egyptians seem to have defined their identity through contrast with the others, the people outside of Egypt. Surviving hieroglyphics reveal how Egyptians distinguish between us and them. Through these depictions, a curious image emerges. They portrayed themselves with reddish-brown skin and curly hair, characteristics associated with Africans, while Asians were shown with grayish-blue beards and white Westerners with lighter skin and straight hair. In the tomb murals of pharaohs from the New Kingdom, such as Seti I and Ramesses III in the Valley of the Kings, we see unusual and distinct representations. Under the sacred light of the sun, god-rife figures appear, symbolizing the different races known to the ancient Egyptians. They depicted themselves with reddish-brown skin, a vivid tone of Nile Valley inhabitants, clearly contrasted with the dark black skin of Nubians and the gray-blue tones of Libyans or Asians. These ancient racial models were not only about skin color, they reflected diversity in hairstyles, clothing, and social roles. Through such visual systems, the Egyptians developed a unique classification that allowed them to assert a clear identity as a distinct people, yet still linked by blood to the wider human family. This worldview went beyond race. It leaned toward culture, tradition, and a collective sense of belonging. That is why in many artistic depictions, even when some pharaohs displayed features that differed from the standard Egyptian look, they were still regarded as truly Egyptian. Skin color was merely an artistic symbol, yet over centuries it was distorted by rigid ideologies, especially during the waves of European imperialism in the 19th and early 20th centuries. These ideas not only obscured Egypt's true ancient history, but also served a clear political agenda to legitimize the conquest and appropriation of Egypt as part of Europe's supposed civilizational legacy. Researcher Zachary Morgan from Western Carolina University pointed out that European scholars once dismissed the idea of an ancient Black Egypt not purely for academic reasons. They deliberately constructed a historical narrative to justify the colonization of North Africa and the Middle East, under the arrogant and fabricated claim that they were merely reclaiming lands that supposedly belonged to Europe. Morgan also emphasized that this imperialist mindset drove European nations to compete for exclusive rights to reconstruct and possess Egypt's ancient artifacts. They did not believe that modern Egyptians were capable of preserving or correctly understanding the history of their own ancestors. In contrast, in the United States, a different strand of Egyptology emerged, one that sought to use ancient Egypt as a source of inspiration and a civilizational model for a burgeoning America. Their Egyptian architecture and art were widely imitated from memorials to theaters. Many Americans of that era even believed that Egypt might be the root of ancient connections to the cosmos, a theory widely known today as ancient aliens. Stories about extraterrestrials coming to Earth tens of thousands of years ago, creating humanity, or using them as slaves have evolved beyond conspiracy theories and now serve as inspiration for blockbuster films like Prometheus Eternals and popular programs on the History Channel. According to this theory, these visitors from the sky transmitted advanced scientific knowledge to humans, or perhaps even altered their DNA to shape our current form. This is why, across the Middle East from Egypt to Iran, one can find colossal megalithic structures that challenge even modern intellect. Many of these structures are believed to be connected to the godlike Anunnaki deities from ancient Sumerian culture, thought to have come from another world. There are also mentions of beings called Pleiadians, originating from the Pleiades star cluster. The question remains how much of these theories are grounded in truth and how much are simply myth. The Pleiadians, beings said to come from the Pleiades, are at the heart of ongoing debates surrounding race, ancient civilization theories, and Europe's interpretation of human history. While countless unexplained phenomena continue to occur across our planet, the lingering question remains, are some of them actually linked to extraterrestrial interventions? But is it truly fair to assume that aliens created humanity? That all the greatest achievements in history, from the Egyptian pyramids to the magnificent structures in Mexico and Mesopotamia, are merely their legacy? This is one of the most debated modern hypotheses. However, Julien Benoit, a French paleontologist, issued a stark warning. The ancient alien theory at its core is merely an extension of Western thought, one that historically denied the creative capacities of Eastern African and indigenous American civilizations. According to Benoit, this hypothesis has, whether intentionally or not, robbed ancient brown and black communities of their rightful credit. Instead of acknowledging their intelligence and capacity for innovation, the modern world attributes all timeless accomplishments to some supernatural alien force. Nick Pope, a former British Ministry of Defense official who investigated UFO cases, also admitted that while he believes extraterrestrials exist, the ancient alien theory deserves more critical reevaluation. In particular, the image of the Pleiadians, often described as tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed beings with a classic Nordic appearance, has drawn criticism for being little more than a reimagining of the Aryan dream. Critics argue that portraying Pleiadians as resembling Northern Europeans is no coincidence. It stems from extreme racial ideologies from the 1940s, when a German leader sought to prove that these white extraterrestrials were the original creators of ancient civilizations. But why is this a serious concern in archaeology, especially in regions like Egypt and Africa? Because the Pleiadian theory closely mirrors an older ideology once used to justify imperialism in the 19th century, known as the Mound Builder myth. On December 6, 1830, during his second State of the Union address, U.S. President Andrew Jackson defended the policy of removing indigenous peoples from Western lands. In his speech, he claimed that the ancient forts and ruins across the region were remnants of a powerful race now extinct, which gave way to the savage tribes. That statement, cold and calculated, became one of the earliest official acknowledgments of the myth of a lost superior race once inhabiting the Americas. That race, according to later theories, came to be known as the Mound Builders beings, often described with features similar to Northern Europeans, tall, white-skinned, and light-haired. They were believed to have vanished completely after being destroyed by indigenous Americans. Strikingly, this model mirrors the Pleiadian theory, a superior white-skinned race from the stars who created human civilization and then disappeared. Today, many critics argue that Ancient Aliens is simply a modernized version of the Mound Builder myth. Its scope expanded from the Americas to include Africa and the Middle East. But this does not mean Africa lacks its own identity or mystical traditions. On the contrary, the continent holds rich folklore, deep indigenous knowledge, and ancient civilizations that do not require aliens to explain their grandeur. An astonishing example comes from the Dogon tribe, an isolated community in West Africa, about 300 kilometers south of the Republic of Mali. They appear to possess astronomical knowledge far ahead of their time. Thousands of years ago, they already knew about the Sirius star system, something modern science has only recently confirmed. Meanwhile, the San Bushmen in South Africa are believed to have discovered ways to access parallel dimensions of reality a mystery that even today's quantum physics is still grappling with. Although both examples are often linked to the ancient astronaut theory, in truth, they serve as clear evidence that indigenous peoples are fully capable of accessing advanced knowledge without the intervention of extraterrestrial beings. And that brings us back to the central question, who were the ancient Egyptians really? In 2017, German scientists published a groundbreaking DNA study showing that ancient Egyptians shared genetic ties with people from the Levant, including modern-day Turkey, Iraq, Israel, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. These people typically had light brown, sun-kissed skin tones, matching the complexions found in ancient Egyptian tomb paintings. While ancient art does depict both black and white individuals, the majority of Egyptians were shown with bronze-colored skin, suggesting this was their predominant ethnic identity at the time. Even today, Egypt's modern population still shares many of these characteristics, though ethnic diversity has been further shaped by centuries of Islamic influence and Mediterranean migrations. Communities less assimilated by Arab Muslims and Turks, such as the Nubians, or some Christian groups, are believed to retain the closest genetic ties to the ancient Egyptians. All of this points to one conclusion: both claims Egypt belongs to Africa and Egypt belongs to Europe are partial and politically motivated. While foreign elements likely played a role, it was the native people who formed the foundation of this magnificent civilization. And so if extraterrestrials did exist and intervene, what was the true extent of their involvement? We still have no answer. But let's pose a bold hypothesis. What if the concept of ancient aliens is just a smokescreen, one designed to distract us from an even more unsettling truth? That there may have once been a human civilization older than Egypt, with a level of technology equal to or even beyond ours, which then vanished entirely. If that were true, what wiped them out? A global cataclysm, an ancient nuclear war, or a planetary reset event like the Great Flood stories that appear in nearly every major world religion? And if it happened once, could it happen again? This is the journey we've taken together through history, through DNA, through myth, and through mysteries still unanswered. So what do you think? Who were the true ancestors of the ancient Egyptians? Could there be an origin story that lies beyond the boundaries of humanity? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a mysterious discovery here at Did You Know? See you in the next mystery.